Okay, right. Let's go straight in. Today's Kris. Great start, John. Well done. Right, straight in. Take two.
Hey everybody, it's John Lamilton here alongside my good friend and business partner, Mr. Jason Brockman. We are here for another episode of the Ambitious Lifestyle Business Podcast, where as always, it is our job to help you get more customers and make more money without just working harder. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this month's episode.
Today we are joined by Kris Oldland, an entrepreneur specialising in the publishing and event space, particularly focusing on the manufacturing sector. He launched his business 1927 Media back in, not 1927, but 2013, building his primary brand, Field Service News, to be the global leader in the field. In 2023, Field Service News was acquired by a long-term partner, Copperberg, and Kris is now Editor-in-Chief and Digital Portfolio Director there, helping them to build on the work that he achieved with Field Service News, taking it to an even bigger scale. Kris, welcome to the Ambitious Lifestyle Business Podcast.
Very much, John. Lovely to be here.
Fantastic. We're having a little bit of a different conversation today, because normally on this podcast, Jason and I would be talking to normally a current 1%er about their business and how they have deployed the 1% principles to massive success and their dream lifestyle. And with your permission, we are going to talk about something very different today, aren't we, Kris?
Yes, indeed. Finding the 1% club too late, I think, would be the summary.
Definitely. So do you want to explain to our listeners just very briefly what we are going to be discussing tonight and why they may need to listen very carefully to today's episode?
Oh, thanks, John. Very, very briefly, I reached out to John, and we've connected a few times and exchanged a few ideas back and forth over the while. And we hit the rocks in 23. And it wasn't necessarily because the business was poor. It was a reasonably good performing business. It was a digital-based business, so profit margins we got to a point which were fantastic. But we dealt with a fair few challenges, and we ended up in a reasonable place. But we had to. I personally had to, cede control of the business, and it wasn't the future that we planned. So it was more of a warning of pitfalls to avoid as well, especially having gone 10 years. It's a fair chunk of time to be running the business, doing something reasonably well, and for it to hit the rocks like that was pretty heartbreaking. But it's about the we get back on, and hopefully somebody watching can learn and see some of the pitfalls that caught me out a little bit further in advance.
Yeah, it's 10 years is an interesting timescale, because I think certainly when I started my business, the stats about, most businesses fail within 6 months, 18 months, the first 2 years, 90% fail within 2 years. Of those, 90% then fail within 5 years. And everyone thinks, well, if you make it past a couple of years, you should be golden. And 10 years is a spot whereby you expect everything's going to be gravy from here on in. I figured it out. I know what to do, and nothing can get me. I'm bulletproof now, isn't it?
Yeah, there is a sense of that. I think we probably would have been able to. You know what, John? I think we were a bit of luck in a different timeline. We probably would have hit into that nice rhythm, and probably would never have quite learnt what I learnt in the last year and a half. There are certain fundamental mistakes that were made that were probably unavoidable. Like deciding to launch our first big physical expo roughly 2 months before a global pandemic. These are things that I subscribe to kind of an ultimate responsibility kind of approach, but I can't really take the blame for that. But yeah, there was definitely a seed of that. Like, how do we? And it was almost like, how do we innovate out of a really tricky time. We've kept trying. When actually, perhaps the view that I have now is perhaps actually coming back into the show, especially throughout the pandemic, where we were hugely exposed. Coming back in, perhaps rather than trying to fight out in a better route, but it is what it is, and it's interesting. One thing I will say is it's really interesting having gone through the process. We've managed to keep the business out of winding up just so we've got additional avenues to explore in the future. But having gone through that process, a lot of my because of the industry I'm in, a lot of my colleagues and friends are in the States. And it's almost like a badge of honor over there. I've started noticing it on CVs. Managed to wind this business down or took this business through bankruptcy, because you learn so much. I'm not recommending anyone go through it. But yeah. I did feel that I think there was perhaps that confidence, not confidence. What's the word? A lack of worry so much. Exactly. You get to 2 years, then you get to 5 years, and you get thinking, right, it should be scalable now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, can I take you back to 10 years? Would that be a good place to kind of bring us forward? Because obviously we're talking now about the kind of the end of the journey, kind of that part of the journey. Anyway, I wonder if we just take it back, kind of that where that started and how you kind of got into that field and where that looks like and what it was all about, I guess.
Yeah, sure, Jason. So it was. I went from backstory like a lot of entrepreneurs, really. I went from first of all, it was a very convoluted journey, like a lot of entrepreneurs. There wasn't a linear kind of career path. I was actually at the time working for one of the largest organizations in events and publishing in the world, a company called UBM. I had moved across to there from another of the UK's largest publisher, Newsquest. And I was there for about 18 months, and I'd managed to go through the brand service management, which is very much related to field service news. They decided to close that brand down, even though we turned the digital part around. I was brought in as a digital sales expert. So even though I'm a publisher, I'm predominantly a sales background. So I was brought in there. We turned that product around, but they saw a market contracting. I kind of disagreed with them. So I kind of kept an eye on what was going on. And also, interestingly, as these things happen with big corporates, it kind of shifted me onto a new project. I was based on a sales salary, so I had to sell something. And they said, yeah, this new project of yours is not going to start until 3 months' time. So we want you to do this, but can you make some money in the interim? I was like, I don't have a portfolio to sell. You've just taken everything away, and you haven't given me the new one yet. So I kind of sneakily, in a way, I think my boss knew, but it was one of those I won't ask if you won't ask, and I made some money for us both. I built a very, very rudimentary site on WordPress. I did a research project under the service management banner. Service management online, which is what eventually became Field Service News, which managed to keep a bit of food on the table at my end, and it also gave me a little bit of an idea. My editor-in-chief at the time, and I say this, please, anyone who's watching this is an editor, don't take offense, but he told me in business-to-business writing, you really only need about a grade C at GCSE level. And that gave me a bit of belief. So I kind of went out and just wrote it. It was a bit like that little Bristol thing, write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. And kind of, I did that under the comfort of having a salary. Fast forward a tiny bit, we then created something called Big Data Republic, which was a tribe, a community. Tribes were cool back then. And we did a little bit too well with that, and we sold that to IBM. For a 3-year contract, which again did me out of a job. UBM asked me to be an event director, which wasn't really my cup of tea, so I rolled the dice and offered to buy service management online off of them. I didn't have a penny to my name to be able to do it, but I kind of knew that they kept a little pocket of the brand as the expo, so they'd say no. But because I'd asked them for that opportunity, and they were the only brand in the sector in the UK, I knew that they couldn't leverage my my contract to stop me from doing anything without them separately. So having done that, I launched Field Service News with a complete ad get. We did the handy little book for field service managers, which was a stack 'em high, low cost ad get, basically directory with some good content in the front. And after about 2 weeks from launching and leaving UBM, they gave me a call. Well, we still kind of got the Service Management Expo and nobody knows anything about this business anymore. Would you mind being our media partner? So that was a bit of a no-brainer. Off the back of that, the two other companies, one of which is Copperberg, who I'm working with now, got in touch. There's only 3. It's a very niche space. They all got in touch, basically each seeing each other. So the guys from the guys from UBM saw me on and knew me, so they wanted some industry expertise. It goes to show how little industry expertise there was in the market, really, to be quite honest. Because the sales guy that had cheekily launched a title had suddenly become the editor-in-chief and was an industry expert. But Copperberg and WDI, who are another organisation in the space, they both did the same and said, would you be our media partner? Because there was no media brand in the space. And without actually having a product, Jace, I had I have my logo on the 3 biggest industry events in the world. So I thought I better make it work, really. So we quickly learned how to publish magazines and build websites, and that it suddenly grew quite worryingly, and I had to go forward with it. So I tried to do that as quickly as I could, but that's as much.
What timeline have we on now? Then we're to this stage. What's that timeline in that 10 years?
Yeah, so that I mean, that was all. So we went from that process, launching. That was in 2013. Up until 2019, it was primarily up until the pandemic, we had a print product. It was primarily a print magazine, but we still had a website, and it was increasingly becoming a digital-led business. We quite catastrophically dipped our toe into the events sector, and then, perhaps that's something we can dig into. I think one of the big failings, perhaps, when I launched the business, I thought, right, well, I've learned an awful lot in my industry about what's good and what's not good, and I've got an opportunity to build a business from scratch as a blank paper, and this is what a publishing company should look like. And there were certain things that I was very keen on. I'd always looked at in publishing, why do media agencies that book ads and design ads, why don't they have a publication? Well, I can come at it the other way. So we started designing ads, started ghostwriting, we started doing a lot of research, we started building content for clients. So we became more of a content creation provider as much as a publisher. We weren't just going to people saying, can you have space? We're going to people saying, we're writing a white paper on this topic. Would you like to be our partner? And then we would do all the heavy lifting. We got to the point where we'd almost got to the point where we were then the last bit that we needed to do, really, for the clients, which would be the likes of SAP or Microsoft or Salesforce, etc. The last bit that we were getting close to was tracking every touch point for them, helping them and their sales teams to how they do that interaction, because it's amazing how few people know that these days, that how many touch points we should have, how that reach out should be done, how they should be utilizing assets, utilizing evergreen assets, something I picked up from one of John's books, and translating that across into our communication with our clients to make sure they're doing their job better. But I think where I went, potentially one of the mistakes we made was launching events. It was outside of our wheelhouse, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. Why did we do that? And I think fundamentally it's because what you're supposed to do as a publisher. So rather than thinking, well, whereas that seed of thought was obviously always there, it should be, we still follow that obvious path of let's be a publisher because we should have an event then, we should do a conference, we should do an expo, we should conquer the world, then we should move it to America as well, and then we should move it to Asia. And actually, we should have just gone, right, we're a really good publisher, we're a really good web design agency, we're a really good content creation agency, we know social media inside and out, and should have carved out separate businesses in that. I went off piece there, Jace, sorry.
That's okay. You've led me in nicely to an area that any 1%ers listening to this know the words that are going to come out of my mouth now, and they know the book that I'm going to refer to, which is just behind me on my bookshelf. It's cover out, and it is the only children's book on my shelf. It is one of the Usborne touchy-feely books, and it's a book called That's Not My Hedgehog. Anyone familiar with Jim Collins' work, Good to Great, will know the hedgehog concept. It's the Venn diagram of what you're really good at, what you're really passionate about, and what the world is willing to reward you handsomely for. And the study within Good to Great is that these 11 companies that he studied out of 1,500 across the S&P 500 across 5 decades that had sustained step level growth from a good company to an absolutely phenomenal company were A, they all knew what the hedgehog was, and B, they stuck religiously to their hedgehog. It wasn't so much that they knew what to do, it was that they knew what not to do. And it was that fanatical, we will not do anything that is outside of this wheelhouse. We are a very, very good publishing company. We're not an events company. And that is a trap that so many business owners fall into because, like you said there, Kris, that company over there are doing it. That company there are doing it. That's what we should be doing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And even to the point as well, John, where we resisted that. And one of the reasons I've got such a great relationship with Copperbook, who like, cards on the table, pretty much came in, at least kept food on the table and shoes on my baby's feet, and kept my work for 10 years growing. I haven't walked out of this a particularly rich man, but I have walked out of this with the potential to finish what I started, which is quite important to me. On an emotional level, it's very important to me. But they're good at events. Actually, having gone to work with them, they're learning an awful lot from me about best practices in publishing. That's why we had a good harmony. I think one of the interesting things, which it's a tried and tested model that you look, and that's what we did at NewsQuest, and you launched a business, you launched an event, you launched a print magazine, you do some clever little bit of digital on the side, then you launch a little conference, then you launch an expo, and it's 1, 2, 3. It's like tick box, and it's right. It was a pitfall I knew to avoid, and I think where I didn't, and I think where a lot of us got a little bit lost was the pandemic just blurred a lot of lines. A lot of the events guys suddenly started coming into my area. Because they couldn't do their events, so they had to find their revenue models. Yeah. There's almost a little bit of, I think this is probably one of the pitfalls that's important to flag up for the 1%ers. How can I phrase this without sounding like a complete egomaniac?
Don't worry about that. Just go for it.
I felt like I had to do something during the pandemic, right? So none of us knew what the hell we were doing. It doesn't matter who you were, if you were like in charge of a country or in charge of a business or anything else. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. And so I did do something. We ran a series of live streams that were literally just let's just bring some. I've always said my job is to bring cleverer people than me around and talk. I can talk, and that's about it. So I did that, and I have, when you hang around an industry for 10 years and you hang around manufacturing, you can bring these people in. So, we were actually a company that kind of harmony between Dyson and JCB, for example, because we knew them from the service perspective and the manufacturing perspective long before that was an actual announcement. And we were talking to publishers that had shifted, like, 200-year-old publishers that had shifted suddenly from print magazines to making masks and all of this kind of stuff. And we're just trying to shine a spotlight, trying to find what the ingenuity was. There was one company, for example, they were using the sanitizer when we all tried to open back up. They used sanitizer, and there was a way that they used the smell to be able to allow to open doors. There was all sorts of innovation. It was just trying to throw it together. I was doing that 3 days a week, and I'd get up at 4 and do one in the Asia time zone, do one at 2 in the European time zone, and then one at the US. So it was great. By the time I did the US session, I sounded really clever because I just repeated what everyone else.
You were the world's leading expert.
The Americans have me on a bracket up there, It's just because they're in a delayed time zone. Don't tell them, he says on the internet. But that kind of, that felt like I was doing something good. And that kind of, I know that's a bit of a convoluted way around, but when we stepped into the event space, we'd already announced it before the pandemic and everything. But there was a part of me that felt that I wanted to bring the industry together in person. And I think that was a very personal thing. I wanted to stop people feeling afraid all the time. And in my own small little way, I wanted to get back to normalcy. And so I suppose going back to the actual message that comes out of that is that wasn't a business decision. That was a decision that was driven by me, and a personal decision. And I think that's very, very hard. Something I've learned is stop thinking of myself and 1927 media as the same entity, which will probably lead on to this conversation, actually. But I think I didn't necessarily, I lost accountability effectively at that point. And I don't necessarily think it was potentially a bad business call. The first expo we launched, we got out fighting. We actually did get a reasonable, it was the follow-up events that went a bit south. Being very British, to train strike that was scheduled 3 weeks earlier got cancelled because of the Queen's funeral and got moved onto the exact same day. And it's like, oh, come on. Wait there, I just need like asteroid from like outer galaxy to hit Birmingham, and I've hit the whole bingo card, But there is that seed of like I said, I've been thinking about what I could have done better, and perhaps making sure that there's that accountability, somebody to go, are you sure it's a good idea? Look, why don't we let somebody else go first here? Nobody remembers Friendster, for example. I always reference this. No one remembers Friendster. Coming sometimes is really good because it didn't do Mark Zuckerberg any harm. So maybe that ego, maybe it's not ego, but maybe having a separation from business Kris and heart and soul Kris would have been a good idea.
I think, Jace, you hear this more than I do. Some of the what I would call crackpot ideas that many of our 1%ers have. I've got a great new idea. Sorry?
My ideas are crackpot. I hear them in my head, John. I mean, out of every crackpot idea, there's definitely something that's going to work, isn't there? That's the thing. And as entrepreneurs, your mind's always working on ideas and thinking about the next thing, the thing that's got so many legs, we need to make this run, kind of thing. And actually, because of the pandemic, and I think that was probably what made that decision easier for you to make that move. It gave you that purpose, it gave you that drive, it gave you what you thought was a social responsibility, and that purpose was what pushed you towards actually, we need to get back together again, we need to do this. And that's basically the events that's what we have to do, and we're gonna do this, come higher water or whatever, but we're going to make sure this is, because actually that social responsibility, my purpose is we've got to get back together. I can kind of see absolutely how that happens. Absolutely. It's nothing.
I think one of the things we've probably been fortunate about, and we've been building businesses together for 20 odd years now, is that we have each other and we are very different. we have the yin and the yang. We have the kind of the visionary and the implementer. So you've got the logistics side of things, you've got the big picture thinking, you've got the detail oriented person, and you've got someone there to go, yeah, I don't think we should do this. Or that's great, but you do realize that if this goes wrong, we are absolutely massively at risk of this happening. Oh yeah, hadn't considered that. And it was that something we hear a lot within the 1% Club is sounding board. Oh yeah, it's a good sounding board. And sometimes actually the other person will actually, that sounding board will bounce back at you. Kris, that's a brilliant idea. I think we should go all in on that. I think actually what you think is a good idea, I think is a great idea, and we should run with that. But without having that sounding board, without having the yin to yang, and I think you've alluded to this when I know we talked previously, was that you didn't surround yourself with different viewpoints, different types of people. And it was, as you said, that merging between Kris and 1927 Media was the same entity.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's something else that, this is not rocket science. You shouldn't mix friendship business. And actually, it's interesting. I've always had a slightly different view on that because I think, in one sense, there's a layer of trust. I think you touched on this. I can't remember which one of your books, John, but you touched on this. There's a trust that you can have, which is irreplaceable with a colleague, unless there's when you're in a small business, intuitively. No, I can't get it right. There's a word that begins with I that I'm struggling with. You'd never believe I have the job title of editor-in-chief. I told you I was just a sales guy that pretended to write. But there is inherently, is the word I was looking for. There is inherently for business. You build close, strong bonds anyway. One of the big losses that really, there was a couple of blows across a 2-year period, which were like, oh, right. It was like that scene from Rocky over and over again. So I'm just hanging on the ropes. But one was a long-standing partner and very good friend. I was best man at his wedding. He's godfather to my daughter. We're still very good friends. I preserved our friendship over anything business related. But him leaving, and I'd always envisioned him being that yin yang, basically. Brian, in a different existence, he was my boss. We worked very well together. We understood each other. We did work very well together. But I think one of the things that was different in that relationship compared to yourself and Jason was I was always the boss. It was not a partnership. It was always an employee-employer relationship. And so that would have been very, I look back now and think that was probably very, very hard for him to speak up against me, because I can be quite passionate, and he came in after about 6 years. So he's come into a business that was doing very well, successful. And basically I being the one person that out of our sphere of colleagues, that wasn't still just a sales director or I actually gone out and built it. So I think there was a little all respect. There's slightly more respect, but I think that if I could do something different, empowering him in a different way to be able to do that, what you're speaking about there, John, to be able to push back and say, hey, because I think he had the mentality in the set. He was very different to me in the sense that he was more pragmatic. He was more, and so I think how I could have empowered that better. Even if it had been something that, like structuring a salary that gave percentage of the business, or inviting him in to acquire a certain point after a year or something like that, could have given him more of a authority in his own head. Because I had it, I trusted his words, I did trust him, and I tried to put him into that position of a partner effectively while still paying a salary. And I think that's a mistake that I couldn't do. But yeah. Again,
it's perhaps giving him the authority to lead the areas in which that is his specialty. The one I always come back to on this is the Disney Corporation. Everyone remembers Walt Disney, but no one thinks of Roy. There would not be a Disney Corporation today without Roy Disney making sure there was money in the bank, making sure that actually we kept the lights on, the bills got paid, and that Walt wasn't just peeing all the money up the wall on these fancy ideas, because he was the creative genius. But Roy was the one who made sure that we could actually pay the bills and keep the business afloat. And without either of those two, without Walt or Roy, you would not have a Disney Corporation today. If it was Roy running the show, then Disney would be the most boring company. They'd be making spreadsheets, wouldn't they?
Yeah, very, 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 very neat, tidy, linear spreadsheets, but they'd still be spreadsheets.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, that's. I suppose, if I may, you can tell that I run my own podcast as well, because I keep hijacking yours and taking it in the direction I want to. I don't mean to do that. But talking of spreadsheets, that's probably a really good segue into the one thing that I think should be explicitly stated. As to where we screwed up, really, is accountants or accountancy, and I don't think it was necessarily a bad decision. I really tried to beat myself up about this, and I haven't in the end. But ultimately, it was the fundamental failure in 1927 was ultimately it was accountancy based, and so my advice to anyone in the 1% Club is, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing the accountancy, but have a rudimentary. Don't do what I do. Outsourcing, go, it's all right, just let them do it. Which is what I did, effectively. And I made that decision way back when, in 2013, when we launched. I got introduced to an accountant by a family member who ran their own business, very successful business. And so they had these, and I'd spent time when I was with NewsQuest in institutional finance, dotted around that area and insurance. So I knew of them. I'm obviously not going to name check them because that would be very unfair. But I knew of them, and needless to say, they have multiple offices across. They're not based in the city, but they have multiple offices within the south. They're a reasonably big company. But I thought, right, okay, we'll get the big glossy office-based accountants, and this is the one thing. A little bit back to our hedgehogs, John. But I have no love nor interest in racing this hedgehog, so I'm going to let you get on with it. Which I think is the right decision. I really, really do. But I let them get on with it in a way that I ceded too much authority. Back in 2018, I'll try to say this without it being too technical. So basically, the way that, and I'm sure there's a few accountants in the 1% Club, I'm 99% sure there are. See what I did there, 99% sure. That was not intentional, by the way. But
take the credit for it.
but I'll yeah. So then, effectively, for the non-accountants, but this is important for all entrepreneurs and small businesses. The way that our accounts were run, which was very tax efficient, was we would put most of the money into the draw would be a director's loan account. And then that would be taken out from dividends every year. Fairly straightforward, makes sense, makes complete sense, and was very, very tax efficient. So again, to be honest, when you're looking at your tax bill, it's not as big as you would have expected. Again, if you're kind of doing that, it's kind of okay. But what effectively they'd allowed us to do was run up an overdrawn director's loan account for nearly £400,000. And it was, because, so again, I'll do it without getting too technical, but when you have an overdrawn director's loan account on your corporation accounts, you effectively pay 33% of however much that has increased, but you get that back eventually. So our accountants kept saying, don't worry about that, it's fine. In 2018, I said, look, I'm really uncomfortable about this. This is when it was about 200K. Because it was just growing a little bit exponentially. I said, I'm really uncomfortable with this. Can we shift myself and my wife, who's my co-director, onto a salary to start reducing this director's loan account down? I'd rather pay a little bit more tax and not be in a position I'm in. And they advised me that, no, it's all right. I don't know if you've seen that meme with the dog where he's sitting in the office and everything was on fire around him, and he's like, this is fine. I was that dog, basically. Yeah, this is fine. And I knew it wasn't really. So we had a challenge in 2023. We lost 4 clients, which accounted for about a third of our revenue. We'd grown 2 clients, which we were still doing okay. But the debt to HMRC, because of the additional uplift, meant that HMRC decided to come at us with a wine liquor. Quite frankly, they were well within their rights to do so. And another key point I would say to anyone that faces anything like this is speak to them and call through. And if you get through, if you get through to somebody that is quite hard to deal with at HMRC, and like any organisation there are, just call back again, because there's some real sweethearts and there are some. And I've learned that don't do the ostrich thing and bury your head in the sand, even though it's really tempting, really tempting. Because I'm the kind of person that likes to come back with an answer, and like I'm very so I kind of like, yeah, you can just wait until I fixed it, and unless you
I've got it all under control. I've got a plan.
Plan Z now, but I've still got a plan. But yeah, so effectively, I had to do a crash course in advanced accountancy from the University of Life, and we resolved it. You know, I mean, that's the good news. Is within 4 months of me looking at it in depth, and I'm quite lucky, like I said, that I've got a bit of background in certain areas that are adjacent. Plus, I've got a similar. I've got quite a good analytical mind. So I could look at it. Not everyone could, and I'm very cognizant of that, and I'm very lucky that we were able to look at it, and we're able to pull down. I mean, Christ, we've resolved nearly £500,000 worth of debt, but that's also a massive frustration because I've lost my business. I've lost control of my business because of this. When I could have solved it, it just took me 4 or 5 months to work out how to do it. I realised that we hadn't been running payroll, for example. So, like, you know, and you can't backdate that stuff now. You know, so I had to kind of do a lot of very, very aggressive accountancy. I've had to communicate very, very closely with HMRC, and I've had to adopt the position of I'm just going to ask for forgiveness after the event of the permission to do it. I had to go into it knowing every single thing I'm going to do is going to cause a massive. I'm sure there's like a one computer in HMRC, probably in the Welsh office, because that's where we're from, and obviously that's where all the smart people are. And I just see a big red flashing light on it whenever our account comes up. You know,
smoke coming out the sides of it.
So we realised that we hadn't claimed any relief or on expenses for 10 years. So when I was faced with the winding up and working out exactly what happened, I was like, well, hang on. I've used these 3 credit cards exclusively for the business. It's only in the last year or so that we haven't been able to update and where they're falling trouble. But if the business goes down, I'm personally liable. So how come the business has never paid? And that's when I stopped thinking me and the business. And so I started to break us into separate entities. And so that was 130 something K of money that needed to just come straight off that director's loan. There was £260,000 worth of retained earnings, which is like, well, why would we have retained earnings? That I still don't understand what that means, to be perfectly honest, because it's a number on a spreadsheet rather than like stuff that takes me to.
Yeah.
But and again, it was like, right, well, let's just pay Claire and I a salary. You know, let's pay me and my wife that's consummate to what we're doing. and we won't take a dividend, but we haven't taken any money out of the business for the last year. So, and suddenly these things become very easily unwound. And at that point, we're able to turn around. I'm now at the point, touch wood. Sorry, I'm knocking the screen now. I'm now at the point where probably by the time this airs, John, I'll be speaking to HMRC and say, hey guys, that rebate that you owe me, you now owe me more money than I owe you, so I'm not paying you anything anymore. That puts me in a much more powerful position. And then I can start looking to the future of 1927.2, which is probably too many numbers in that for a business name. But anyway,
that's it. What was the business worth at its peak, Kris?
We were offered. We were offered. Well, we were talking to somebody back in 2021, 22-ish. They wanted to buy a quarter of the business off of us for $750 was the price we gave them. When we were courting, so I went through a process of trying. We actually had 4 businesses looking to acquire at a cut price of $495,000, which I said was about 25% of the value. So it was worth somewhere around 2.6. Was at its very, very peak. Those businesses. This was when we had hit the rocks. So I was like, look, and this before I looked at the accountancy stuff. Like, right, I've got a hole here of about 400. I would like to walk out with maybe something, and I've got a hole here. So we kind of priced it at 495, and I was like, oh, right, okay. I knew what it was worth, and we did it on EBITDA, and there are various permutations of how you value a publisher, because so much of the value is in the IP and the brand. Quite hard to be quantifiable. There are specific rules in publishing. Generally, you either go from, and this is often in true of most creative industries. It's a multiplier of revenue or a multiplier of EBITDA or profit, and then I basically put of that 3 different valuations and came to a mean, which everyone accepted, which was around 1.8 when we were looking to sell. And then we said, right, I need 490 grand. What's that? 27. But we'll just say, look, you buy it for 27, whatever it was. I knew what I needed to sell it for at that point, and that's the old value. But yeah, so that hurts. That hurts because now I'm building it for somebody else, and that's I'm hugely grateful to them, and I've worked with them for a long time, and I can see a really positive future for us. But that will always be in my head. That's hard to adjust to. That will always be. I'm building it for somebody else, and I shouldn't be. I should.
What could have been?
And my wife's phrased it well. She said, "Look, you've got to almost deal with it like a grieving process because you've had your shot of glory." And I disagree with it because there will be more avenues to explore. But where she sees it is that you've had your shot of glory kind of stolen away from you without necessarily being your fault. And she knows that I take most things. Like I say, I subscribe to like the Jocko Willing kind of like ultimate responsibility. I definitely wouldn't have made it into the Marines, but I think it's a good mindset, But I've learned to you need a little bit more humility than that. At the same time, at the moment. But yeah, that is the big one. I'd say the pitfall to avoid is and it's not don't outsource, and it's not don't outsource to big glossy companies. Although I actually think I would have been much better with a smaller. And I said this to him. I said, look, I think I would be better suited. I said this in 2018. I think I would be better suited to a smaller company that could hold our hands. Where we're falling through the cracks. That's, I think, the frustration is I obviously saw these things because I was shouting them out, but I didn't follow through on my conviction to leave that organisation and go to somebody who I had, again, more trust. And I placed too much trust in them, which, again, I don't think is a misguided decision, but I think understanding what I was trusting them to do, because ultimately they're just putting stuff across for me to sign. and I'm
Is that
cycling in that.
absolving of responsibility, whether that outsourcing is the problematic part, isn't it, as well? Actually, yeah, you do that. I won't worry about it. And yeah, sign what? Yeah, sign that. I'll sign that. I don't need to know. I've given it to somebody who should know better than I do, and you're telling me what I should do. And yeah, absolving of all responsibility. Thanks very much. Yes, I know it's my signature on the bottom of the returns. Yes, I know I'm saying all the figures are correct. Yeah, I know I'm saying I admit liability for everything that's on here. But you told me that's what I've got to do, so I'm going to do it. So that absolving. One thing I really want to touch on quickly, if I can, is you did come and join the 1% Club for a period of time. That was June 2023, which was pretty much towards the end of the problems that you were kind of having, I guess, really. And I know in some of our marketing, we kind of say the 1% Club isn't really for the last roll of the dice kind of places. And I think that's where you found yourself in that particular part of the time, wasn't it? I just wondered how you got into our world and what you hope to achieve from that, and then ultimately, I guess, why we couldn't really help at that point. If we can do that in a couple of minutes, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Let me just condense that down. No, I mean, to be honest, I followed a path that I'm sure many 1%ers did, which I followed John's books to begin with. I believe it was. I think it was. Routine Machine that I read first. In fact, we didn't like. In fact, I listened to your dulcet tones. We did on a trip down to Cornwall with my boy. So my boy, who is now 11, is a big fan of yours. So he says hi. And we followed that path. Paid attention to a little bit of the stuff that was on the 1% Club. I bought into that philosophy, or I've kind of already bought into it. You know, when you read lots of different pieces and then somebody coalesces it, and you're like, oh yeah, we're on that page. And yeah, it was. I suppose I have a glass on my desk, which I always. This is a very silly little visual, but I always have that glass, which I just keep a nice, pretty little. It also allows me to clean my screen, but I stuff it in the top half because I try and remember that I'm half full, and I have that there. And so I suppose when I joined Jace, I was still thinking that we could innovate our way out of it, and we got really damn close, to be honest. I think a couple of months extra, and we probably would have. What I was just putting in place was to monetize the audience properly, which was through educational piece and a really nice process driven that was quite aligned to the 1% idea of incremental gains, leveraging. We got a 600-hour library of resources and consolidating it down. So we'd say, right, this is the resource we provide to your team. It was pretty cool. So part of me was looking at, right, how do I take this next step? How do I learn from others that kind of doing similar things to what I've done in bringing good ideas together? I was actually fulfilling quite some role just for manufacturing and service related industries. So that's how I stumbled into it. How I got it wrong, or it was just definitely was just like I said, right top, probably ultimate clip for the plug in the podcast. What I really got wrong was finding the 1% Club too late, finding John's books.
It's really good because obviously with the 1% Club, we hope to leave your business 1% better at the end of each week, and that's never going to turn around a business that's really struggling. And that is I guess that message really that we put out to the 1%ers is seek that help earlier and get involved. And I think from your story today, that is definitely there. It's know your numbers and seek help earlier and get in there. Our last question of the day is always, what is ambitious lifestyle business mean to you? What does that look like, Kris?
It's a really good question, and I should have given it more thought, but I've actually given it quite a lot, Jason, and it's still a really good question. It's hard to answer. I think freedom and security, I think, is the balance for me. All I've ever really wanted to do is like most parents, give my kids something more than I had. And my parents worked incredibly hard to do that for me. But I grew up wrong side of the tracks in Cardiff, and it's like I sort of think we live in an age where, especially here in Britain, we can return to being an island of shopkeepers, as we were once called. But I don't think that's any slur. I think we're a great nation when it comes to building small businesses and making ourselves self-sustainable. And we live in a wonderful age now where, like I said, I went from being, there's no way, Jason, I should have been able to do what I did. Being a guy that was sold print ads and stuff like that, to build a global reputation. I'm still invited to speak at events across the world. A leading brand, literally the within our niche, the leading brand in the world. Lots of people still know who we are and what we do, and a very profitable brand. Like I said, we should have, other than a few kind of poor left turns, we really had built something very, very profitable. We've got to grasp that opportunity. I really believe that, and this won't be my last venture. In fact, there's multiple options on the table. I will make sure that what I'm doing with Copperberg is well designed. I'm looking more towards great processes, which will buy me more time. I've gone from working 90 hours a week to like somewhere around 60 to 70 at the minute. By the time the processes are in place, it'll be 40, obviously tops because my contract. But I'm not going to stop then, am I? And you can't take that entrepreneurial blood out of. So as soon as I get that job kind of under control, I'll be looking at, what web development work, what creative work.
And that's the entrepreneur in you, and I love that. That's fantastic. Chris, I'm going to have to wrap us up there if that's all right. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on our podcast today. Thank you so much indeed, and see you very soon.
Lovely. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
No problem. Great to see you.
So there we are, another episode in the can. How was it for you? Please let us know. However you listen to these podcasts, please leave a review on that platform. Let us know what we can do better, what you like, what you don't like, and how we can improve to make this show even better for you. We'll see you next time.